I will I will still do a little introduction for those who don't know who Rob is. It's a real pleasure to have Rob Scotland with us today. Rob has an extensive background in strategy and brand communications. He's currently head of brand marketing and communications at VO Technologies. And throughout his career, he has trained and mentored many strategists. He has taught at Berk's School of Communication, where he still works as a trainer and also spent around 7 years teaching at Hyper Island. And Rob has also held the role of head of the strategy at McCann London. And that's actually where I first met Rob. We were kind of like um, working together on mentoring young talent. It was during the 30 Minutes University of Planning program, which I kind of co-created with Gordon. And Rob was one of the, I would say, top mentors, always open to have a conversation with young talent, always supportive, always there in the room. And he's also here today. And with, I don't know, little applause from your side in the room, let's welcome Rob into our little Strategy Pints bubble. Woohoo!
You know, whenever you hear that, you think, "Oh, that's me. What? Who? Hang on a second. Talk about me? Extensive? What? Okay, that's not too bad. But yeah, but cool. No, but thank you very much, and it really is a privilege, and I appreciate whenever anybody takes their time. And I live, maybe everybody's the same, in constant fear of it not being that good. So when we did a podcast a few months back, I was actually perched in a hallway in a New York hotel because the Wi-Fi in my room was crap. I didn't want to cancel, kind of thing, and I wasn't sure whether it was recording right and everything. And it turned out to be a really cool piece, which is really good. And I didn't get into too much trouble, so I gave away. No, because I nearly mentioned some people by name, and I'm glad I didn't do that. So I was dangerously close to giving away too many secrets or opinions. But I will say all opinions in this are my own from that perspective. But guys, go on, fire away. It was so much fun. Let's just rekindle that energy, and also everybody in the room, just type a question, or if there's anything that's bugging you or really annoying you. I'll see if I can provide an opinion at least.
I'll jump in because having been a part of that conversation, there's something that you said that has stuck with me, and strangely, it's popped up a couple other times in some other conversations. Just meeting with strategists at different levels of their career, and often it comes back to this ability to somehow stitch together, seemingly on the surface, unstitchable things, but somehow underneath the surface, you're seeing the alchemy. And I remember there was a certain, you talked about, you saw a kid do like a cool trick on a skateboard, and then it like triggered like an Ian McKellen speech that triggered this, triggered that. Like if you go back to like, Rob Scotland Jr. and the young Rob or Robbie or whoever you were when you were like, was that a tendency, that pattern recognition that you saw early on? Did you foster it, develop it? I mean, it often is
Yeah.
a thing that I hear a lot of strategists talk about, but let's just curious, that sort of sixth sense or that awakening that you had around that. Talk a bit about that, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things of where what we have as a community, we're kind of we're always curious. We're just really curious, and we want to know why, and maybe even sometimes get in trouble from those types of things. For me, it's because I was always the youngest in my friend group. Because when I was born in January, or sometimes a couple of years younger, so I wasn't that high on the totem pole of credibility to be able to tell people what to do or dictate anything. So quite often, especially as a kid, I'd be either watching, itching to get involved, but watching and being really, really curious. Or so it could be, playing football with my cousins or something, and I'd be the last to get picked. So, or I'd have to watch a lot of the time. And you sit there and you just notice things which are really, really cool. And then I think even younger, I just used to love looking out the window and just seeing what was happening in the world as the world was going by, people watching that kind of stuff. And actually, it really wasn't until like when we have a conversation like this that I actually think about what those DNA kind of components are. But as I got older, what tends to happen is that you start to travel and you start to see certain things, and you see these weird kind of, it's almost like Minority Report, where you go, oh, hang on a minute, that's That's that, and that's is that linked? And then you start testing little like cultural hypotheses. You go, oh, I wonder why that's like that. And then with the internet, we're probably the kind of people where we're watching a film and then something historical comes up and then your second screening going, oh, it's Genghis Khan. Oh, when was that? Oh, right. Oh, this was like that. And this was really interesting. And I just think what all that happens is that your job ends up fueling that to a certain extent, where you start to see things, and then you meet other people like you guys here, and yes, you take quite a lot of pleasure in these completely disparate things. And you're going, okay, like I was having a really good discussion with somebody who's he's a guy who's quite high up in AWS, and we have bonded over talking about how music and economics are linked in a really kind of geeky way. And we've looked at how, certain types of music, like BPM speeds, or so how certain music gets aggressive and how that can be linked to either economic patterns or political patterns. So I don't know, like in the 80s in the US, when the drug kind of cocaine thing was at its high, all of a sudden you had this amazing music, and this mixture of kind of Latin music and house music and hip hop out, and it was all 140 BPM, but it was all the same thing because not everybody's taking cocaine, but you get to see how my brain starts to work. So you start to go, okay, hang on a minute, and then the where music was de kind of or de-invested in certain schools, that led to people to take little electronic music and start sampling and that kind of stuff. So kids who had no formal education, which is really different to what you would see in the 50s and 60s, where most people played an instrument, and that's where jazz and those stuff. Anyway, that's a good example of where you go and then you start to find these really delicious links. Then it wasn't until I started working in advertising that I found that those links were things that really fueled creativity, which was really, really nice. And then you could start to see, like, I don't know, I'm gonna go watch Devil Wears Prada, and I'm gonna be able to spot all the things from the first film because I'll be sitting there going, "Oh yeah, hang on a minute, this, and all the little bits, the little Easter eggs and things like that." So I think if you're like us, you probably take an unhealthy kind of curious attitude into why you go, oh, this is like this, why, as a kid, and then it goes decades later and you're turning it into a job and you're building hypotheses and you're testing hypotheses. And like even now I've been talking and I'm seeing a couple of you nodding, right? That's what I'm okay, good. I'm not getting mad. It gets really interesting. And one of the things I really love to try and do is cheerlead that for others, to give you the space to go, no, you're not, you know, it's okay. It's okay to have a hypothesis, to stress test it, to discuss it in groups like this and sharpen and debate, which is something that's really missing. But yeah, the more we can do it, the better.
Yeah, it's a kind of fluency, and it's something you have to work on and practice as well. Yeah.
100%. I mean, I remember, I think I've told the story on the podcast, but I loved when I'm a big kind of I'm 50 years old. I'm born mid 70s, so I'm sneakerhead. Du jour, hip hop and sneakers was my thing, right? That was my teenage thing, right? And I remember we were with a CEO of a London ad agency. We flew from London to New York, and we landed in New York, and we're at the baggage cart waiting for our suitcases. And this guy was absolutely huge. He looked like really kind of menacing dude, was working at the airport, right? And he said to me, "Nice sneakers, dude." And the CEO I was with was like, he said, "Do you guys know each other?" And I'm like, "No, never met this person in my life." And then I had to explain how the fact that what I was wearing, a pair of shoes I was wearing, would engender cultural credibility, and how that was priceless to me. That was worth more than money, that a complete stranger says, "Oh, you've got good taste," and goes, "Oh, nice sneakers, dude." And this CEO of this ad age, it blew his mind. He was just like, "But I don't understand how could this happen?" Because in his world, it wouldn't happen that way. Whereas in my world, it was like the pinnacle of you kind of were rewarded for the pinnacle of taste. It's that kind of stuff that absolutely fascinates me.
Kamal, maybe you want to ask the question. I know that you dropped the question in a chat, so maybe because you are in the room when you're
Yeah.
present.
Yeah. Hi, Rob. Nice to meet you.
Hello.
And thanks. So it's interesting because now that you've gone in-house, I'm really curious. I was in-house for a long time as well. And so I'm curious what your experience is coming from agency. And when you talk about the like creativity and the pattern recognition, how did you transfer that to an in-house environment where you now have P&L responsibilities? And on reflection of that, how would you advise agencies today to show up with or for their clients?
Right. I have to remember this is being recorded as well. So if I get too excited, I start swearing a lot and stuff like that, right?
We can do that after this.
So,
Yeah.
the thing that's very specific to me that I always, when I was very early, when you were a junior, I was really early in my career, right? And even as a junior strategist and that kind of stuff, you weren't actually asked to speak much. You weren't actually asked for your opinion. You're almost a bit of a service in service to the CSO or in service to the strategist, and you were just given bits of work. And I was always really annoyed by that because I was like maybe, 21, 22. I'm highly social. I'm like really fashionably aware. I'm doing all of the things that, we'd be doing a campaign for my age group or my demographic. And I'm like, well, I know everything about this. Nobody's asking me at all, right? And I'm having to sit. And I remember we did a campaign for a club called Ministry of Sound. I'm like, I'm in Ministry of Sound every weekend. Nobody in the room was that I was, and even the creatives, right? And I remember I had to literally bite my tongue until it was bleeding to not say, to not like, this is bullshit. You lot don't know what you're talking about. This is rubbish. It was a very sanitized version of what I was experiencing. And what that's fueled me ever since to not to want to be able to speak is fine, but to actually ask everybody in the room what they think, right? Conversely, the thing I found is that, especially at an agency level, I had this, to be honest, all the way up to even when I was at the head of strategy in London for McCann, was that it was very infrequent when you could actually speak truth to power. And that when we had our own business, that was our. I think I've got it as a tattoo somewhere. It was the old. It's the old religious kind of quote, and there's real value in speaking truth to power. So what was happening at agency level, and more frequently than I really enjoyed, was that there was this shroud of account management and the brief and all these other things, which often got in the way of a really good conversation with the key client. And I can tell some stories about that. But what I found was that the higher up you were able to get, so when you were able to speak to the people with ultimate responsibility, we had some fantastic conversations, and you could speak to people about very expansive topics because they were tasked with thinking 3 to 5 years ahead. And when I crossed over from agency, the first time I was on the brand side, I was then in the room for those conversations. Um, Again, you had to be careful. You had to pick your battles about where you would speak, because often marketing, in some instances, isn't always seen as the first place people want to be or people want to hear from, because marketing can be seen as an expense or as merely as a function. But it's really interesting you said it, because now, especially in the last 10 years, the quality of the conversations has got me into much better situations. So now I'm frequently in conversations about product development. I'm frequently in conversations about things which I call brand, but they're calling communications, or how should we show up, or how should we speak. So once I got off my high horse a bit, 'cause I used to be a little bit too evangelist to want to tell people what to do. Once I actually listened and then tried to work quite um, quite clearly on developing credibility with key people within the organization, it's really lovely when they start to ask you. So I've had it with my CEO recently, where he kind of closed the door. He said, "What do you think about this?" And I'm like, "What? I don't know. Wait, what is it? What are you talking about?" And he's showing me, product development. And I'm like, "Well, hang on a minute. The first thing is, we're not going to be subjective. We need to be objective. What do you want to achieve? What are the key areas? The usual things we all go through, right?" So it's only a few times when I have been able to do that on agency side. Um, the other thing that annoyed me sometimes on agency side is everything is, if I ever see a timesheet again in my life, I think I will, smack my head off the corner of a window, because everything is so boxed into what we're working on. And I think there is a time and a place for that. But I also know that some of the most enjoyable moments I've ever had have been when and forgive me if I'm repeating what we talked about on the podcast, because it's the same things, but when I've talked with the global head of a division at Nestle about cricket, because I'm from the West Indies and he's Indian, and we spend the first 5 minutes talking about that, and then we move in, and then we develop a bit of rapport, which allows me to ask some quite tough questions or provocative questions later on in the call, and we have an amazing time. And also, the West Indies have beaten India, so I felt it was okay for me to ask the questions, which is good. And then he then got his revenge when India beat the West Indies. I was like, what the hell? Is anybody from India on the call, by the way? Just checking.
Great.
Oh God. Okay, see, I'm not. I'm not even getting. It was when Tendulkar beat the West Indies single-handedly, right? But what's really nice, I think, is that when you do have access to senior people, and when you are a strategist, I personally believe that strategists are the only people that they really want to be around, because they frequently are. They don't know what to do. They need people who can at least be objective and make them think. And I think they want to have a good time. The more time I spend with a lot of the senior stakeholders, it's quite a lonely pursuit. They have to hold the entire organization, the future of the entire organization in their hands. And whilst a lot of people will be yes, men or women to them, they often really enjoy it when somebody is provocative, but in a thought-provoking way. And they actually really enjoy it, which I think is really, really cool. There is one agency where for a period of time I thought they did it fantastically, which is Wieden Kennedy in Portland. When and I'm very specific. I always talk about kind of from 1995 to kind of 2005, or around about it 2005 2010. Because I remember visiting the offices. I couldn't tell who was a Nike employee and who was an agency employee, which is really scary. I was like, okay, so you work for no, okay, you're the creative director, and you work for no, okay, good. So this kind of assimilation had happened at a mass level. So I think that's one side of it. But let me make sure I answer your question. In terms of the pattern recognition, I think the key thing I've always stayed on, for me, I'm a qual guy to my soul, right? I've come to love quant as a way, because the corner office listens to quant. But what the pattern recognition will do is tell you why. So often I ended up hiring a really, really good quant scientist where we could test those hypotheses. But we would then get a quant piece of research that says this mega trend is happening, or this minor trend is happening, what's happening right now. Then I could go into my weird world at the beginning and go, right, this is why I think it's happening. These forces are at work culturally. Or we're on the cusp of this. I think it's there's a professor at MIT, and I loved his quote, because he would always talk about being at the beginning of this age and the ending of this age, where things were going in cycles, right? So when I thought that was allowed, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. So we're the edge of this and the early of this. I wasn't able to do that as much in house. Whereas apart from if we were doing research and then you had to present it in quite a structured way, the pace when you're in-house is so much that you have to literally be tapped in. So I could brief an agency right now in the morning, and before lunchtime, certain aspects of that brief will probably change. And I often felt sorry for those agencies, because they've gone away with this brief like it's a Bible. And it's not. It's like an expression of pain for whoever wrote it. They're like, I would really love these things, right? But for me, the brief is just the start of the dance. The brief is almost like a paso doble, where you're like, okay, great, but I think there's more to this. I think there's I think it's true. I think there's some things here. I think there's some things you haven't thought about. And it took me quite a while, actually. It's only I would only say fairly recently, when I realized that the person on the other end, that is the only time in their day when they're able to have that experience. The rest of the time, they're in meetings, budgets, people are asking them something. So for that 1 hour, and maybe for about half an hour of that 1 hour, they're allowed to be a strategist as well, or they're allowed to think in a really interesting way. And when they really enjoy it, guess what? You get more back, right? Which is really, really cool. So regardless of whether I think you're an agency or in-house, I think that proximity to the client, or that proximity to power and the ability to speak truth to power, is really, really cool. Now, I'll share something with this group, and it's totally fine. It's, I think we passed the statute of limitations, but one of the reasons why I resigned from my role at McCann, I'm stuttering. It's the first time I've ever said like this, right? Is because we were developing. It was during the pandemic, and everything was up in the air. Right, we had clients who were achieving amazing business growth because frozen food was all of a sudden being purchased more, and they were like, and then we're able to have a question and say, right, how do we keep this? Because we don't know when this pandemic will end. How do we keep this advantage? That is a wonderful strategic kind of brief to chew on, right? And we had other people who were having the complete opposite, where they were like, experiential, the whole, we're an experiential brand. What the hell do we do? How do we rethink? Do we remodel what our business was? So what I loved is I had approximately 20 strategists, and we were just playing jazz all day kind of thing, right? And we turned from being, whereas the creative is typically the rock star and the cool person, they get shoved to the back because it's like, yeah, that's fine. How we execute this, well, let's come to that later. What do we do? And I think I really loved it. I wouldn't say I did my best strategic work, but I loved some of the work that my strategists did, because we were able to speak to people like this. You had to see, some of you guys got blurred backgrounds. We were in people's homes kind of thing. When would you ever be in the home of like a CEO or a global director of like, eBay, or suddenly a kid walks in and stuff like that. So it was wonderful from that perspective. And then when the pandemic ended, I really wanted to keep that vibe as much as possible, because the ability to have a hypothesis, the ability to not always have to be right, but to be like an investigator, Sherlock Holmes-esque, it's so much fun. So I would definitely urge everybody to do that. You're allowed. I'm giving you permission. But I am a troublemaker. I will say that. So yeah, I do fit that from that side. And then the other point that you mentioned, which I think is really cool, is that if you can get, and this is something I go on and on and on about, my team hate me for it, right? How many people, just hands up, work for agencies in the room? Yeah, cool. I think one of the key things is to know how your clients make money, to know that business forensically. I'll be the first to admit, I always say to people, read the annual report. You don't have to do that, just read the front page. That's fine. Then copy and paste the rest into Claude and get it to give you the cliff notes. But I think the more that you can get into the mindset of understanding this business, its competitive advantage is based on manufacturing, let's say. That's how I look at sports brands like Nike and Adidas. They're manufacturing brands. And then what I got to learn from some of the conversations was you're able to then have a much different conversation. You're not talking about campaigns. You're saying, okay, well, you're already working on something for in 2 years' time, or what is the design to realization term of this particular product, and how does fast fashion change this? Or how does the Strait of Hormuz change what's going on, or which markets are becoming more important, and therefore you're going to take, like, I remember times where people would take a product off the market and bring it back. They've done that with the Adidas Superstar. When you're having that level of conversation, it's you're much more tapped into what they're thinking. It's much higher and much more interesting. Yeah, this is fun.
We have a question from Misha. Maybe you want to ask it. You dropped it in the chat.
It's hi, thank you much for your content and for your speaking. I'm a big fan of your Substack. And my question would be a little bit from the different angle, not about these very upstream things of how businesses operate, but getting to your cultural side, which is, so the first question is how to build culture grasp muscle. And the second is very connected to it, is how to compensate if you are naturally bad at it.
I love that. That's a typical strategist question, first of all. So I don't believe you on the second part, right? But I will give an answer on that. But I think even coming into this call, major imposter syndrome. I'm listening to Biber's intro and I'm like, who? Oh, that's me. Okay, great. Okay, fine. Because I bumped my head many times on the way around. I think if you can, what's the Chilean phrase? Was it copuchento? If you can be, just engage in being almost unhealthily curious about something. And that's what I love about the internet right now. or it will allow me to understand a little bit more about what's happening over there or over here. And then I tested it, just like now when I was asking people who's in India and I mentioned Tendulkar, I see people smile. I go, okay, right, I'm on the right track. Yeah. So I think don't be afraid to always test and learn. I think one of the biggest fallacies that I hate about strategy and strategists to an extent is this old school belief that we have to be right. I think you have to be curious more than you have to be right. And you have to be willing to say, that's why we ask questions, which is really, really cool. So I think, if even when you're doing desk research, the ability to go and see what's happening. So a really good example is I am not the biggest fan of the Kardashians, but I ended up getting mildly hooked on their TV programs because their way of developing stories is so effective. Same thing with politics, right? So I maybe have a certain type of politics, but I will frequently watch the other side in absolute awe because I'm going, oh my God, oh, that's how they did it. Oh my God, I can see it, right? So the more that you do that, the more that I think you begin to develop a style that is your own. It's very personal to you. But I think as long as you're curious, it would be fantastic. It's like if we were all at a bar physically, I'd want to know where'd you live and what you do and where'd you work. This is for the purposes of this conversation. It's a one-way conversation. But if we were in another setting, I'd be like, okay, Nakunj, where are you? Okay, cool. And which province and what are you eating later and that kind of stuff, right? And then we could talk about that. So really be curious is the first thing. I think if you feel you have a lack of natural talent in it, I would say you're not alone. I don't think anybody wakes up and gets magically talented. It's just that for me, I was a little kid looking out the window, or I was the youngest in my group. So I've just spent more time kind of doing it. And then what starts to happen is you build confidence when you make a leap. You go, I think this is true. Like, I've been doing it. If you've seen it, I've done it 3 or 4 times on this call. I think this might be true. Then when I see the positive reaction, I go, good, okay, I'm right, excellent. And then as long as you never let that get to arrogant status, I think you're fine. For me, it's been, I use modern culture as the kind of way, the things that I'm not into, things that I'm not interested in or into, but if I can just spot those things, and then what happens is they always go in cycles. So, I'm a 90s kid. I'm seeing loads of 90s. My kid is wearing a bunch of 90s stuff and everybody's wearing baggy trousers again. I'm like, oh my God, that's like what we used to. So we used to wear. And then my kid's going to be, well, that would make sense because the time from the music you're talking about now is the same distance of when you talk about the 60s. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, no, it's not. No, it's not. It's like, yes, it is, Dad. Yes. The Second World War was I'm like, oh my God, it's me, right? So the wonderful thing is watch everything go in cycles, which is really, really cool. And then what I love to do is spot what's the new ingredients to those cycles. It's the same thing if we were talking about AI or whatever it is, right? And just have fun with it. Honestly, don't worry about being good or bad. Nobody's an expert and nobody's that right. You just, work on your hypotheses, and that's what a hypothesis is. I feel that this might be true. What do you think? And go from there. And have fun with it. That's the key thing.
Thank you.
No, thank you. It's super cool. And actually, that's what I do with the newsletter. The newsletter was because I've been working in a particular category, in sports tech category, for a very long time. So all of the work and all of the thinking was just to that. And actually, to that point, I felt like I'd lost that training, right? So it was during Christmas holiday, and I thought, right, I saw people doing Substacks. This is 2 years ago. And I thought, right, you know what? I'm going to commit to doing it. Seth Godin talks about just do a blog. And I mean, I used to do blogs like 15 years ago, do writing as a way of just, again, what you're saying, right? So writing is another way to do it. And I thought, right, I'm going to commit to doing it. I'm going to do it, at least every 2 weeks. And 2 years later, I'm still doing it. But wow, you should see me Sunday night. I'm like, I need 3 things. I need 3 things. And I'm going back through what have I liked on Instagram or TikTok or what have I read? And then now it's giving me purpose where during the week I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'll take that and maybe I'll put that in. And then I spend like an hour going, is there a link to this? Is there something there? Then when there is, I'm like, oh, fantastic. Got it. But it is a bit pressurizing, but it's quite fun. So thank you so much if you do subscribe. I appreciate it. Got to keep it up.
It's great. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Cheers.
Nikunj?
Nikunj, I think, yeah.
On the point you said about no one can teach you how to be curious or you cannot learn. I remembered this when I was just entering this field, when I was learning from my mentor. I connected with a strategist in India, and he asked me, "Why do you want to do strategy?" I remember the first response I had. Uh, I'm uh, I am curious. One part of me in the humanities like philosophy, sociology, people, then business, products, techs, and strategy lets me connect all these. It's not that it
100%.
helps me, but this job lets me do all this together.
100%. Yeah.
Uh,
100%.
but yeah, that was in 2023, and over time, I have lost that because we have to mold our answers to the interviews, to what the industry is looking for. There are stereotypes like creators need to be creative, uh, strategists need to be curious. That is also a stereotype.
Yeah.
Uh, Now, I am curious personally, but when it comes to work, I come from a business education background.
Yeah.
And like you said, learning how the client makes money, I'm interested in that.
Yeah.
Like how the business architecture is, how the product distribution, all that. And in advertising marketing, that is often seen as not welcome. So India is a very creative oriented industry.
Yes.
So it's seen as something marketers don't do or advertisers don't do. So I have like, what are your thoughts on it? Is it right? If it's not right, how do we break from it?
Yeah, no, definitely. I love that. So it's really fun. I don't think it's right. And I actually think, I talked about what we're on the verge of, what we're on the verge of right now. I think that right now, anybody being strategic who does not have a business, at least some aspects of business that they're interested in or that they can speak to, is at a major disadvantage, because now you won't you won't get very far with the key stakeholders. The thing I would say almost for you is I think you're almost at a too much of advantage, which is really, really cool. Me, it had to happen by accident, right? So I was the culture guy, I was out there, as an anthropologist. I'm like, oh, but I've seen this and I've tasted this and I've come back from the forest and I've seen these things. And I would go, and there you go, pow. What do you think, CEO? I know more than you. Pow, big mistake, all right? Huge mistake. And it wasn't until I got to spend time observing what was happening in with key stakeholders. So my former CMO, and wherever you are in the world, Miller Phillipson, thank you so much, because she brought me into the boardroom, and there was 2 rows, right? I'm in the second row at the back of the boardroom. She said, "You can come. You're not allowed to say anything, like on pain of death, say anything." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" But that was my finishing school, where I got to hear and see business leaders making big decisions. Like, I mean, I think Pandora at the time was making around $2.3 billion a year in selling jewelry, one of the biggest of their kind, right? And I got to hear the wild things that people said, the wildly subjective decisions they made. But I also got to understand the language of business. And a really good example of that is I used to have presentations. That's why I didn't want to present today. 15 years ago, I would have had a presentation. There would have been videos and color. I would have been trying to wow you with all this other bits and bobs, right? Doesn't. Every time I presented to the board, people were entertained, but they weren't necessarily. I didn't necessarily get the investment I wanted. Following me was the McKinsey, the Bain, the consultant with the parting and the white shirt and blue tie, who would come in with 3 slides, a couple of pie charts, a couple of calendar charts, a timeline, and he'd get $20 million of investment. And I'd be sitting there going, like it was like an audition for a talent show, and imagine failing over and over. And I'd be like, "But you're idiots. You don't get it. Look, I'm showing you, you consumer. We've gone out and yeah, that's fine." As soon as I began to learn what was keeping those people awake at night, and I'm giving you all the trade secrets here from my point of view, the more time I spend with a key stakeholder, and I understand what is keeping you awake at night. And then I apply my lens of how I can help her or him solve that. That's where the value is, right? So what's really interesting is I think you've already identified where the convention, especially in your region, is to not be like that. I would almost cloak it. And then you got to look at who you're speaking with. If you're speaking to the creative director, then they're going to hate it that you can talk about, EBITDA and stock options and those types of things, right? But to the CEO, you can mix that, which I think is a really, really big weapon. And I think that was a major turning point in my career, because it turned me from being a very good creative strategist to what we talked about earlier on, to the point of where people think that you understand their challenges and you're not trying to push them to do something, you're actually helping them, which I think is really, really key. So I would say almost do a bit of cloak and dagger, be very selective about when you show certain aspects, but in the right room, you will fly, because you'll get your ideas through much faster because you understand business. And literally, it was a wonderful, wonderful thing that she did for me, and completely changed my career. And it meant that I was a lot more comfortable in those rooms, because we could have conversations and discussions, and then my creativity was in the solution. So just really quickly, so a really good example is where we've been making a series of documentaries. We were talking about that at the beginning of the call. My business is a B2B software as a service business, right? But if you look at VO Technologies, it looks like a sports brand. That's my strategy, because that's my way to get it across. I'm going back to the 90s Nike thing, right? But make no bones about it, we're a B2B software as a service subscription business. And then now what we're able to do after 5 years of building this brand, we're now able to start to push different things. Early on, I needed to make awareness. Nobody knew who we were, right? We were this strange company with a weird name and a weird product. Then about 3 years in, we reached peak awareness. Everybody knew who we were, our color, our product, fantastic. The key people in certain markets, what we needed, they knew who we were. Great. So now my conversation isn't about what campaigns do we do. It's exactly what I just said. We can say, I feel that we've reached peak awareness. I think we need to shift our positioning. I think our communications now speaks to a different person in the decision making tree. And here's why I think that way. And honestly, without the business side of my education, I would not have got anywhere with it, because the muscle memory was to do what we'd always been doing. But immediately I could show them 3 examples and say, here's where companies have done that and it's gone wrong. Let me do a small test. Let's try this with a communications lens, see how it works. If it works, we keep going. We've been running that for the last 2 years, up until the beginning of this year, when we need to do it again. And we need to look at a new mission, a new way that we're going to do that. So I've now got a new system where I use this thing of this analogy of like NASA, when I've said, right, the little tiny pod, you got this massive rocket, but the astronauts are in this tiny pod at the top. The brand is the tiny pod at the top. We're going to try something. We're going to do all this wild and wonderful stuff and find new areas and new people. It's going to be in ways that are completely unfamiliar to the business, but we're going to attract people to our brand, right? That's now meant that I think basically the rest of this year and into next year, I'm making films, documentaries. That was never on the brief. Nobody said that. And then as I do that, then we do an analog magazine as well, because we do all this digital stuff, then we need something else. So all of a sudden I'm operating without a brief, without a big brief. What I'm doing every week when I meet with my chief revenue officer and my CEO and my chief financial officer is I just want them to tell me what's keeping you awake at night. What's the key problems? Then I'm like, great, let me come back to you with an idea of how I can help. Which I think if you're ever in an interview situation or in a new business situation, that's the first thing I say. How can I help? What can I do? That's why I didn't want to jump on with slides, right? Because I can sit here and just talk at you guys, or we could have a conversation. How can I help? What are the topics that's annoying you? What's really bugging you? And then I can be the usual rebel that I am and try and inspire you to create some change, which is cool.
What I like about what you've been talking about here and connecting 2 things back to pattern recognition is earlier you talked about, like, you remember those days when you were at the Portland office and Wyden, you'd go visit and like you couldn't tell the difference between like the Nike client and the Wyden folks. It's like they look the same. And so there's that assimilation, but yet on the other hand, we're no good to them when we become the client.
True.
Like otherwise, like why do we need to be in the room? And so like keeping enough, separation so that when so that we can protect them against sometimes the bad ideas or things that they have, or we can be the voice that then says like, yes, but, so we've
Yeah.
earned our keep in the room, how can I help? How can I help? But meanwhile, we're not just being so subservient or just making certain we're picking up all their language and just like mirroring it back to them. We've done that enough to be welcome in the room. But then when in fact we have to kind of lay down some law or provide a contrarian point of view,
Yep.
still remember that's our job as opposed to just being in the happiness business. Yeah.
Always on the verge of being fired. Yes. Literally, I say that I think once a month. I'm like, how much? I always joke with my CEO's PA. I'm like, is this a good time? Because I'm gonna go and tell him no, kind of most of the time. But Chris, I think that's such a fundamental point, but the point at which you earn that credibility, because I think some people don't quite get the timing right. I've worked with people where my former business partner, love him to bits, but he's the ultimate contrarian. He'll be like, "Oh," and I'm like, yeah, whoa, we've got to pick our spots of when we do this. But speak truth to power is still speak truth to power. If this was a royal court, you have your people who are genuflecting and yes, sire, no sire, etc., etc. But it's that one general that's like, maybe we shouldn't do it like that. The wind is blowing this way. This is going to happen, and those are the people I really, really like from that perspective. I always love in Asian culture with the ninjas were the ones that if you wanted to carry out an assassination, they'd go get a poison egg, creep in, serve it in the food and leave. You don't have to have a big war with everybody running up and doing that. But to build on what you were saying, the thing I love the most is when, and I think there must be people on the call who have this, right? Imagine a scenario of where these people who are running these businesses want you in the room, when they want your opinion. That's when it actually starts to get really, really interesting, because it means that you're joining them on the accountability and you can't just be wild and crazy, which is what I've been on occasion. But the more I began to understand the information, back to Nikush's point, right? I've been in situations, and quite frankly, with what I was saying wasn't bad, but I didn't have the background information to know. So I said, "Oh, you should do this," and without knowing. But there's a financial impact to what's being done. Or I remember once I was suggesting to somebody they should look into doing retail stores, and I hadn't looked into the reality of the retail store in malls, for instance. The contract term was at least 5 years. So I was giving a really lovely creative idea without understanding that that's a 5 to 8 year contract with someone. So it's got much more accountability. Once I know that, of course, I'll speak slightly differently, right? So I love what you're saying there, Chris. And I think we should all be aiming for what you said, aiming to have that space in anybody's mind. I mean, I know, Chris and Biber are exactly that. People come to work with you because of that, which is amazing, which is what we should all aim for, really. Go for it, Emma. Yeah.
So just a thought, because there's almost a tension in what you're saying, in that and I think it's a perennial tension that every strategist will have, right? Which is that you are raising really difficult questions, but by virtue of being a curious person, you also have a level of imposter syndrome that's super healthy
Yeah.
and built into being built into being curious, right?
Yes.
Like if you have blind confidence, you're not very curious, right? So
True.
so there's like a level of imposter syndrome, and there's a level of like just confidence in the room. And my question is, when that gets out of balance and you get a bit scared, or you have overstepped and you're like, what's your kind of self-management piece that kind of gets layered into that?
Right now, it's a 27-year-old. I'm nearly 50. It's a 27-year-old woman called Anna Sophie Helbeck, who I can look at and go, "We good?" She's like, "Okay, oops," because we all get excited and we get a bit crazy, right? So I think for me, it's a team exercise. So if I'm presenting, I can't be listening. So I have my people in the room. We all have separate jobs. And if they're asking, I'm also watching as well. Now I can do a little bit where you can watch body language and those types of things. But I think having a team around you, and actually I'll give you a really interesting scenario that my team is used to now. We spend more time before a meeting stress testing. We are tearing whatever it is to bits. We're inviting the maximum criticism before the meeting. I want us to have thought about, like a chess match, I want us to have thought about every potential scenario, and then how would we answer that? That's my American football kind of background, where you prepare for every scenario, right? I remember once we had a situation where we played a game and it rained and we didn't have rain gear. And it's smart, stupidest stuff like that, right? What did we do after that? We went and bought 2 tons of rain gear, and even in the summer we carried it with us. It's never happening again, right? It's the same thing of where it's a team sport. So this is where, again, like we talked about earlier, you should lean on your juniors. For me, I'm the first. We've got 2 17-year-old kids running our TikTok, right? And I'm always like, what did you think of it before? Oh, it was boring. Okay, what was boring? Oh, your music choices were too. I was like, oh, what music should we listen to? And they started putting, and now it's taken off. We just had something almost go over 1 million views right now, and I've got these 2 kids just running it on their own, right? So when you remove that thing of where it's just you and you make it a team, who's your team? Who's your network? I've got people who I send like before I do like a speech or a TED talk or something like that, and they are notoriously critical. I mean, they are utter buttholes. Oops, sorry. If you just joined the call and I said the word buttholes, sorry. There is context to what I'm saying, right? But they're absolute arseholes, right? But I do it on purpose because I know I can't tell how high the wall is. I'm doing something, I'm working on it, I'm this close to it, I can't tell how high the wall is. So I'm like, hey, please, I need your help on this, right? So the more you seek out people within that helps. The more you have a team of people around you to go, hey, would you look at this for me? Would you be a contrarian to this for me? Even we've been building our own work with like on a different LLMs, right? And we build that in because an LLM works specifically to be quite passive. So we built in a snarky kind of version of it, which is really, really cool. And I'm like, right, tear this to shreds. And it's wonderful. So the more you can do that, I think the better, and you build that team around you. And then what happens is you go into that situation relatively calm. And I found that, especially when I get quite passionate, I'm not really calm, and that affects how I would be thinking about portraying a solution. And then the other thing, going back to the spending time with key stakeholders, often people are testing you because they just want to see what your reaction would be. Because often that's what happens to them, especially if you listen to any shareholder calls and things like that. They have to field the wildest questions. And if you can maintain your composure, and if you can show that you're considerate and you're thoughtful, they're actually judging whether they invest in your proposal or not based on that alone. Not when you're an idiot, which is what I used to do back in the day kind of thing, right? But yeah, cool. Does that answer your question?
Yes and no. I guess I
Go
was
on.
more wondering because
Let's
I
keep
think,
going.
well, because I think I completely, first of all, thank you for saying the stress test thing, because I feel like I walked out of being in house and that was kind of the habit. I was like, everything must be defensible because they're going to come at me. And now I've learned on the other side of it, the more I talk to agency people, they get really frustrated with me
Yep.
because they're like, why are you asking so many difficult questions? And I'm like, and so now I'm like, do I have PTSD or is this a methodology? So you've given me a perspective, which is that perhaps I don't have PTSD. Maybe I've been trained well. So that's one thing. So I appreciate that.
100%.
But but I guess my other question is like, do you ever, I know you're stress tested, and in an agency when you have timesheets, you don't have time for that necessarily, right? Or you can't account for it. You might be doing it
Right.
in the shower and on a walk, and it's part of that value that doesn't get captured.
Yes.
But do you like ever fundamentally just get scared? Like do you ever just get like kind of a bit of a
All the
wobble?
time.
And
All
then
the
when you have
time.
that wobble, I guess my question is like it's a bit more of at an individual level.
All the time.
Yeah.
100%. If
Yeah.
you're first of all, if you're not scared, something's wrong. And
Yeah.
I would just go back one step where I think I suspect you're in that halfway bit in between, right? Because the problem is that, you know, on some levels in-house, you would not be able to present something without having it well thought out and considered. You'd literally get thrown out of the room, right? But on the other hand, I would say that your gut instinct over time is just as valuable. You know, it's and I think that's really, really valuable as well. So I think somewhere in between is really, really good. There are times we just don't have time. And what I tend to be is very honest with whoever I'm reporting to about that. Say, we tried this on a fly and it didn't work, you know, and I'm honest about that. But I've had some really crazy examples where I've tried something. The biggest example, we tried something 4 years ago, press send, went to lunch, and actually didn't give it a second thought, came back and our website broke because it worked so well. So I think the more I'm like, I can't predict it, all we're doing is we're just throwing, you know, we're throwing stuff and we're seeing what sticks, but also we're not this sniper on the roof, pun the bad pun, that can, you know, or Eros with the arrow that can shoot once and it can work. It's a consistent behavior trait. And I find that actually with a lot of successful people, that they're really good at saying where how many times they mess up or how many times they try things. It's not everything that works. I think that's a fallacy we will be made to believe. Yeah. Great chat. Nakunj, I might read yours because you said a follow-up. The stereotype of the strategist here is someone who has X years of experience in the creative or execution field, not all theoretical, and it boils down to never trained in strategy, whether advertising or business. So the advantage backfires in agency settings. Now I'm going all in on freelance, so it should be better. Yes, 100%. But I think what is really important is I've shared with you what my profile is. I would almost argue your profile, I think you will get the ear of the business person. And then you have to then bring the creative back around. So a really good example of something we used to do quite a lot when I had my own business, when I was independent, was that we would go into a situation with a slight assumption. So we'd almost say, right, we know we don't have access to, let's say it's a huge organization, right? We don't have access to all their data, but we see a very interesting consumer behavior pattern. And then we do that link thing, right? So we go, right, we see this pattern over here. We see this in the press, or we see this in the financial press about what's happening. We've heard that this product or this type of thing is being rumored. So we say, right, put all of them together. We maybe have a couple of watch outs. If you are doing this, you should know about these 3 things, because this could have a severe impact on how and when you launch. And again, it's not necessarily about being right, but it's about being interesting, because then they know that you're not going to have access to all of their information that they've got before making that decision. But the level of intelligence behind it will make them go, actually, that thinking is quite smart. And then that's when we often used to get briefs off the back of that, of saying, right, what would you do if it was this scenario? And we'll go, okay, right, fine. That worked to that degree. So I think there's something really, really interesting about the convention of the working practices where you are that I love opposing. I love that. I think you could do really, really well with that, because it's like everybody's facing this way and you're facing this way, which I think is cool. I would be combing the business press for interesting things and saying, well, you know, these 5 companies all made the same very expensive mistake. You know, it's not all about the dressing, right? It's about fundamental strategic decisions, which I'm going to make sure you last for the long term rather than from the short term. So I'd lean into that, almost like, you know, the villain in the superhero movies. Not saying you should be a villain, but I think you should almost lean into that of going, well, everybody's doing this. That doesn't work. Let me show you 5 examples of what does work. And the reason why it works is sound, fundamental business with a really good creative bit of planning on top, which is amazing. Love that.
You also need to be a little bit kind of aware that we have spent 1 hour with you. And if you are, I don't know, ready to answer, I don't know, 1 more or 2 questions, then
Yeah, no, for sure. This has been fun. This has been, by the way, what I would say is, please don't think that this hasn't been really, really educational for me to hear the kinds of tensions, kind of questions that are being asked. It's really, really interesting for me. So I've been just as interested as that. Please, yeah, no, ask if I've got as much time as you've got. I know Chris and Biber probably have stuff they got to do as well. But let's do a couple more at least. Let's end on a high. Go on, Biber, you got one.
I was constantly thinking about which one is your favorite Kardashian, because you have mentioned this example like 2 times also this time and also on the podcast, and I was just like thinking, which one of them is the favorite one that you are most
honestly,
inspired around?
because the thing is, right? So what would normally happen? My wife might be watching, right? And I'm like probably second screening, working on something else, acting like in the beginning I was like, what is this? You know, why aren't we watching something, I don't know, chess or something like that? Let's watch something else. This is beneath me, kind of almost, right? This disdain that I had. And then you get hooked, because they have within the storytelling, there'll be a lovely kind of hook or a lovely kind of manufactured, and I'll be like, what did she say? What happened? Who was that? Kind of thing. And then I find myself going, all right, fine. And my favorite is Kris Jenner. She's the architect of it all. It's incredible. I mean, I wouldn't do what she's doing at all, effectively use my family for business purposes. But
Hello.
these guys, they've had like 10 seasons.
Hello.
Oh, hiya.
How you doing?
I'm not too bad. How are you doing?
Well, actually, this is Samantha's daughter, and I'm speaking, and I'm actually on mute.
Amazing. Well, Samantha's daughter, what's your name?
Iris, and I say hello, you. Hello.
Hello, I'm really, really good.
Mhm.
But hang on, Iris, do you have a question? I think you might have a good question.
Well, actually, one thing, had you asked me a math question because my mum put on mute because I think she's shy.
I didn't hear that. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
I thought she was shy.
You thought your mum was shy.
Mhm.
Well, I would say this: we're all pretty shy, you know.
Really?
And yeah, 100%. Yeah. Don't let anybody tell you they're not the people who just are the most confident. They're always faking it.
Okay.
Yeah. But you don't sound too shy. You're pretty cool.
Yeah. Actually, I'm not telling Mummy that I'm not on a mute. So can you keep this a secret,
I
please?
will keep this a secret. Hey, listen. It's only us. It's only us that knows. But thank you so much, Iris. What I'll do, I might just end on one more question. But if you want to listen in, you're more than welcome. And then if your mum hears this back, she's gonna really laugh at this. This is really, really cool. You did well.
Okay. Okay,
Cool.
bye. Be a mute
Bye-bye.
now.
Thank you.
Oh, I know, so bye.
See you later. Exactly what we were talking about, right? Just absolute curiosity.
The next,
Fantastic.
you're educating the next generation strategist.
Wow, that's amazing. Cool. Okay, beat that.
Yes. Yes. Rob, did you plan this before? It was like some sort of like culmination of this
Oh, hey, listen,
meeting.
I wish, but was it out of the mouths of babes? Wow, fantastic. Super cool, flipping heck. But what I was going to say before we go, the key thing, that the vibe that I'm picking up from what we've spoken about is very similar to some of the things which used to cause me a lot of anxiety and a lot of annoyance and worry, right? And I think what I would definitely say is be really cognizant of where you're putting your energy and how much you're being self-critical, but also a little bit maybe too hard on yourself from that extent. And I think what is really, really nice there's a lot of things which are quite challenging right now that's going on, but one of the things that's really nice, and I think this community is the absolute proof point of it, is that you're allowed to have these thoughts that you're having, these hypotheses, and work through them and stress test. That's the whole point. I think we're living really in an age where it's not about being right or wrong. Things are moving so fast in some ways, but also being very circular in others. So please don't be hard. It's not a time to be hard on yourself. I think it's time to stay curious. And where possible, look to help the businesses you're working with to further success. And I think anything else is a complete waste of time from that perspective. Oh, how much?
Yeah.
Hold on. Any paper on some themes here? Would you mind? Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'd love to. It'd be amazing to do that. Thank you.
Anyone else wants to, I don't know, ask the last question, or we will invite Samantha's lovely daughter to jump into the call, come back to the call, because otherwise we are too shy. You sounded her mommy too.
Hello. Oh, sorry. Hi. This is my mama that we're talking about.
Oh, thank you for the introduction. I had no idea. I just went to the door and she answers one of my things. I just told her to
Samantha,
hold my phone.
Iris is an absolute superstar.
I've been hearing this recently, her whole life actually. Sorry.
Well, no, sorry. I have a funny feeling that we all are going to be working for Iris at some point, or either that she's going to be president. She is amazing. She was the highlight of the call.
What
I
did she
tried
say
to.
to you?
You'll have to watch it back. We're not going to share. It was
dear.
amazing.
Okay. Thank you.
It was your daughter. Your daughter is going to be president or empress of the world.
Yes, the meeting is recorded, so the link will be shared, and you will see what your daughter was sharing with us, that you are a bit too shy, and we are too.
Yep.
Oh,
She called us all out on our shyness. It was brilliant.
oh, okay. Thank you, I guess, for telling me
Yeah,
that
honestly.
answer. Okay.
You got to buy her body weight in candy now. You owe her for that, because she's we've got like, hundreds of years of strategic insight in the room, and she just cut us off all at the knees. It was amazing.
Well, I don't know where she's got that. Well, I do know, but also I don't. She just spelled onomatopoeia for me today, so that was fine.
It correctly.
Sorry, don't mean to
Correct. See, we're in the presence of genius. Honestly, we're in the presence of genius. You got 12 strategists in the room, and Iris just killed us all. It's absolutely fantastic. I will remember this forever. Iris could walk up to me in 20 years' time. I will remember this. That's the kind of impact that you want. Puts us all to shame.
Oh,
Thank you, Robert.
oh,
Thank you, Rob.
Thank
okay.
you. Appreciate it.
I think I've been overshadowed here.
Complete-
I had
all of us are. Don't worry. All of us are overshadowed. It's no problem.
wow. Thank you, guys. Didn't realize so much has happened in like less than 1 minute. I wanted to ask you, because I think we've spoken before. What is the situation like now for like people that are stuck in between entry level and junior level and mid to junior level? Like, what is
Great
it looking
question.
like from your side? Because
Yep.
I find that still, because I lack the 1 year, even though I think the way in which I think is a lot more senior, there's still that kind of glass ceiling there. So even with freelancing, you still need acumen behind it, else it kind of falls flat.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I'm helping quite a few people with this right now. I think that in some markets, and it goes back to a little bit what Nakunj was talking about as well, is that we can see that the agency world is going through a little bit of kind of a restructure kind of thing. We can see with lots of things that are happening. We can also see that the role of marketing communications is also going through a state of flux. The bit that I find really, really important to remember is that the need for what we do hasn't changed at all. So businesses that require a strategic viewpoint on what to do now, next, and in the future is always going to be there. But the conventions of how we're used to it being served or happening, I think, are changing. I think the key thing, and if you can do it in a freelance basis, it would be the same thing, is to try and show decision makers why what you do is important to their business or their agency or whatever it is. And the more that you can repeat that, the more opportunity there is. Unfortunately, in a lot of organizations, some people are still trapped in between legacy issues around who is new, who is junior, mid, or high. I really disagree with that. We talked about that earlier, where I think there's a lot of value from those who have a fresh point of view, who are maybe younger, for instance, or less experienced, because you have less bias and less baggage, you're less prone to repeat mistakes and those types of things. So I think, unfortunately, that is the experience of a lot of people in organizations that I think are not going to be around in 3 or 5 years' time. Whereas the organizations who are a lot more curious themselves, who are looking for people who can unlock competitive advantages, who can unlock creative insight and strategic insight as well, I think those are going to win. So your job as the person who's looking for those roles is to make yourself just kind of flip into identifying who are those people, who are those organizations, where are those opportunities, and then you've got to get on their radar as much as possible. I often say to people that, you know, if you take the time out and just you can find 5 interesting people per day. There's all the people on this call, you know, might be you know, the next colleague or the next kind of situation you want to work with, which is really cool. So when you take away the convention, I'm really hopeful that despite things being quite challenging, I think it's really, really cool.
Thank you so
Nico,
much, Rob. I just had a semi question on top of that. Sorry if I'm
Okay,
taking
cool.
too much time.
No, you're good. You'll be the
I would
last one, so you're good. Go.
I would want to ask, like, how do you personally brand that? Like, is it a case of, because I know there's a lot of people that are free moving through the industry at the moment because of seniority or the level system, but how personally brand yourself in this environment? Like, obviously you
Good
can't
question.
bypass the conventions, but also if you feel like you have a lot more to give, considering how extreme the market is at the moment, how do you personally brand it? If you have the chance, how would you market
Yeah.
yourself?
If I was fired tomorrow, my process wouldn't change. And it's a good question to end on, I think, as well. And I think that's where the tools and the systems that we have available means that, you know, I can talk to Nikunj, you know, in India, for instance, right? Place where I've not been physically, but we can have a conversation. We can reach out. Everybody in this call, we're all bound by that a little bit as well, where, you know, Chris is in Berlin, Biba's in Berlin, Chris is in Dallas, right?
will be here too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
A few
But
months, so.
exactly. So, but what I think is really important. Let's say I was fired tomorrow. It would be the same thing. Now, I'm sat in Copenhagen. I've used the newsletter as a way to try and be a bit of personal branding, but also something that's interesting to me. I don't actually tend to check the stats on the newsletter. I do it maybe once or twice a year, but it's more for me to do. But there's another school of thought, which is realistically, you may only need 50 to 100 people to know who you are and that you're available. But what you got to do is identify who those people are, let them know. And we've done that in the past, actually, where we've picked people and we said, we don't know you, but we really love what you're about. We love your work. John Gersema, who we talked about at the very beginning of the call, to bring it back full circle. We reached out to John Gersema, one of the most esteemed researchers and qualitative kind of people in the world. And he gave us half an hour of his time that turned into 2 hours of his time, right? Because we ended up having an amazing conversation. And then 20 years later, Chris is about to meet him next week, and I'm praying he remembers us. So it's about being proactive, but also identifying people that you think are cool, that you can take inspiration from. And I still do that all the time. Maybe people on this call that I'm about to do the same thing with, and defy those odds about it being about seniority or anything like that, for sure. Great chat.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your answer.
No worries. Appreciate it. Go on, Biba. Close the show, or we'll be here. We'll keep going. No.
No, I mean, I propose that we will have a debate like all together, like after your presentation. You didn't do a presentation; you are just like, you know, rolling the ball. So it's just like for us to, I don't know, open up a question that everyone can jump in, and it's maybe then not directed towards you. If you guys want to do it like that everybody is equal now in the room. It's not about, sorry, Rob, we are taking the crown away for being a guest in the room.
Do it.
No, I'm joking. Yeah, guys, but I don't know, maybe there's some sort of like an open question or something that is like in your minds. Otherwise, we can continue the conversation that I opened today about like how you see the marketing in current situation. Do you see some differences or not? But if anyone has any other questions or some sort of like things that they want to share, this is a safe place. Nobody will be judged.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, I love him all.
we could- we could
But it
stop-
is like this. Sorry, Christopher. Yeah, please.
Do you want us to stop the recording at this point
yeah.
for that reason? Yeah.
Yeah, I do believe that. But I mean, like, this is just like, when we are on social media, like LinkedIn, we always feel like there's someone who can attack us because we have wrote a post